Today, we are pleased to feature Dr. James Loomis Jr. Dr. Loomis practices internal medicine and is the medical director of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine's Barnard Health Center in Washington, D.C. Before coming to the center, he practiced at St. Luke's Hospital in St. Louis, where he was also the director of prevention and wellness. In addition, he has served on the clinical faculty of the Department of Internal Medicine at Washington University School of Medicine. Now, for all you sports fans out there, Dr. Loomis has served as team internist for the St. Louis Rams and the St. Louis Cardinals. And get this, he has 2 Super Bowl rings. He was even featured in the documentary The Game Changers, a film about plant-based athletes who are breaking records and smashing stereotypes. When not practicing medicine, Dr. Loomis enjoys reading history books, cooking, and teaching plant-based cooking classes. He also enjoys running, biking, and swimming. He's completed numerous half marathons, full marathons, and even triathlons. For his 60th birthday, he completed the Lake Placid Ironman competition. That means swimming 2.4 miles, biking 112 miles, and then running a full marathon at 26.2 miles. That's an incredible feat at any age. As you can tell from his bio, Dr. Loomis is vibrant, energetic, and active, keeping physically, intellectually, socially, and professionally engaged with life. We are so pleased to have him here to speak with us today. Thank you and welcome, Dr. Loomis.
Thank you for having me. So what I wanted to share with you today is kind of what's come to be my philosophy about health and what it means to be healthy. Over the past 10 years or so, 12 years, I've come to the conclusion that we really make healthy living way too complicated. If you step back and you think about human physiology, human behavior, human nutritional needs, kind of through the lens of our evolutionary biology, and really ask the simple question, what did all those things evolve to do? Well, at a fundamental level, and this is true for any living creature, all of our behaviors in anatomy and physiology and nutrition and metabolism evolved to facilitate us living long enough to find a mate and pass on our DNA. And again, that's true for any living creature. And for most of human history, the 2 primary tasks we had to be able to accomplish to make that happen was the ability to find food when we're starving, and then try not to be someone else's food when they were starving. That's where our stress came from. And we had to respond to that stress through physical activity because we had to gather and hunt food or run away from fight leopards to survive. So we evolved to be physically active. You look at your knees and ankles and your heart and lungs and our nutrition metabolism and even our stress response. We have adrenaline, which is designed to help us get ready to perform activity. And then we have cortisol, which is primarily designed to help us recover. And assuming we survived, that's when we'd rest, recover, and refuel. And we'd refuel with whatever we can find around us on a given day, which we'll talk a lot more about here in a minute. And that cycle of stress, activity, recovery repetitively over time, that's how we built resilience. That's how we got stronger and faster and smarter. We could endure more stress. That's how I was able to accomplish, doing an Ironman at age 60 years old. And all is good. And now let's fast forward to the modern world. Both fortunately, but in many ways, unfortunately, we don't have to do any of that to survive anymore, right? Think about how many calories you have to burn each day to get more calories. Well, probably not very many, right? We've got Uber Eats and Instacart and restaurants and grocery stores. Like I said, we don't have to do that anymore. We don't have to spend energy to get energy. The kinds of energy and nutrients that most people consume bears little to no resemblance to what we're really supposed to be eating, which we'll come back to in a second. We're no longer facing stress and threat physically. We're running and fighting emotionally. And most of us aren't worried about starving to death getting by leopards. We worry about jobs and money and relationships and family and COVID and politics and traffic and weather. And then we compound it by not adequately resting and recovering. We drink too much caffeine. We drink too much alcohol. We don't get enough sleep. Our sleep's not restful. So as opposed to the resilience that we're designed to have, we end up exhausted mentally, physically, hormonally. And in fact, I would argue that 90% plus of the cause of 90% plus of the chronic problems that I see every day in my medical practice are directly related to this mismatched lifestyle, right? Blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, heart disease, breast cancer, colon cancer, depression, anxiety, insomnia, autoimmune disease, all of it fundamentally rooted in the fact we lead a lifestyle we're not designed to lead. Yet we're going to spend close to $4 trillion in the United States this year, taking care primarily of the consequences of this mismatched lifestyle. So what we call healthcare today is not healthcare, it's sick care. And arguably what I learned in medical school was a giant game of whack-a-mole, right? So up pops your blood pressure, so we whack it down with some pills. And here comes your sugar, so we whack that down with some pills. And here comes your cholesterol, we whack that down with some pills. And then eventually we get to the point we start whacking out body parts, right? Whack off a breast or whack out your prostate gland. That is not healthcare, that is sick care. And so to be truly well, which means to mitigate the vast majority of the risk. Now, before I get to the most important part, now there is a genetic component to many of these chronic conditions, but two important points about inheritance. So first of all, genetics, except in some very specific, fairly rare genetic disorders, in genetics, DNA, makes up probably 5 to 10% of the risk. For that, I'm talking about things like breast cancer and colon cancer and heart disease. But what's really fascinating is that over the past 10, 20 years, there's an emerging evidence around what's called the epigenetics of lifestyle. And what that means is it's the ability of the food we eat and how much we move and how much we stress and what environmental toxins we expose ourselves to actually turn genes on and off. So for example, if you've got a genetic predisposition to type 2 diabetes and you lead a very healthy lifestyle, those bad genes stay turned off. The good genes stay turned on that protect you. So diabetes does not become your destiny. And then vice versa is also true, right? So you lead a less healthy lifestyle, the bad genes turn on, the good genes turn off, and then in fact, then it does manifest. So the point of that is that your genes don't necessarily need to be your destiny, and the greater your genetic risk, the more careful you have to be about leading a healthy lifestyle. Now, the other thing about inheritance, which we overlook, which is probably more important, is a simple fact. What else do we inherit from our families besides our DNA? Well, one thing we inherit are food ways, right? Foods that you like, foods that you don't like, recipes you use, how you celebrate with food, how you comfort yourself with food. I mean, where do we learn to serve cake and ice cream at a birthday party, right? We typically learn that from our families. And what we inherit on our plates is much, much more important for our long-term health than what we inherit in our DNA. And if you want an example of that, you think about a family potluck 4th of July barbecue, and you see what everybody brings, hot dogs and hamburgers and potato chips and soda and beer and cupcakes. Well, the reason everyone's obese or has diabetes or whatever is not necessarily because of the genes, it's because of the food, right? But we want to blame it on our genes, which is not necessarily the case. But that being said, so again, the genetics only makes up 5 to 10, maybe 15% in some cases. The vast majority of the risk comes from the lifestyle that we lead. So to be truly well, we have to achieve wellness, if you will, in 3 separate but highly connected domains. And then we need to limit or eliminate our exposures to environmental toxins. And that's primarily tobacco and alcohol, though I think there is increasing concern about things like pesticides and herbicides and heavy metals and things like that in our diet. But the principal domains are physical wellness, and we achieve that through movement. And we need 30 minutes to an hour most days, something to get our heart rate up. And a couple of days a week, we need to replicate picking stuff up, moving out of the way, light weights. And a quick comment about movement. As I mentioned earlier, as human beings, we had to be physically active to survive. But physical activity through most of human history wasn't a willful event. If we didn't hunt and gather food or we didn't fight leopards, we didn't last very long. And again, in the modern world, both fortunately, but in some ways, unfortunately, because we no longer have to perform activity to survive, physical activity has devolved into what many people now consider exercise. And what I mean by that, we've come to view it almost as a discrete event. I have to put on special clothes and go to a special place and do a special thing, and it starts and it stops. And we have a tendency to do that or not do anything, not recognizing that there's lots of ways to incorporate physical activity into your day-to-day routine, which may not involve exercise in the way we think about it. Going for a walk after dinner, going for a hike in the woods, take the stairs instead of the elevator, park on the front of the parking lot, go work in the garden. All of those things count. And in fact, it's been shown that 5 to 10 minute blocks of activity that are accumulated through the day are almost just as effective as 30 minutes continuous. So for example, 3 10-minute walks is just as good as walking 30 minutes. So don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to discourage exercise. The point is you don't need to exercise to lead a physically active lifestyle. That's the point. Second of all, we need to be emotionally well. And that's about stress and stress management and sleep. how we recover from stress through sleep. And then lastly, we need to be nutritionally well, which means two things. We got to eat what we're supposed to eat and stop eating what we're not supposed to eat. And again, we'll come back to that in a minute. I think the other thing we overlook is how connected these domains are. The fact that you can't truly be emotionally well without regular physical activity. And in fact, the more stress you have, the more activity you need. And the reason is, your brain can't tell the difference between worried about COVID and seeing a leopard. So we get the same stress response. So what happens when we create a mismatch between how much we move and how much we stress? Well, now all of a sudden, these stress hormones can start to turn against us. The adrenaline, for example, can make our blood pressure go up and make our heart palpitate and make us anxious and make it hard to sleep at night because our mind's racing around worrying about whatever happened today or what might happen tomorrow. The cortisol, so we don't recover from the stress, which just makes it worse. The cortisol we make. So cortisol's job is to help us heal after perform activity. That's one reason we give cortisone shots. But the other thing it does is it can stimulate our appetite and preferentially store what we eat as belly fat because it's trying to help you refill the gas tank before you fight the next leopard. So again, when we create a mismatch between how much we move and how much we stress, that cortisol can turn against us. It can lead to things like stress eating and weight gain or make it hard to lose weight. There's a fundamental connection between diet and physical activity. Think about your car. When was the last time you parked your car in the garage for a year and didn't drive it, but still put gas in it 5 times a day? Even if you're emptying your gas tank, when was the last time you put 30 gallons in a 15-gallon tank? And probably most importantly, when was the last time you put diesel gas in your car, even in moderation, and expected it to run right if it runs on regular unleaded? And, we take better care of our cars typically than we do of ourselves. And I would even go so far as to say the vast majority of that $4 trillion we're going to spend on sick care is because we are continuously repairing people's cars because they keep filling up with the wrong kind of gas. I think it is fundamentally that simple, which brings us to the $1 million question. And that is, what kind of gas should we put in our cars for optimal health and performance? There is so much misinformation, disinformation, confusion, conflicting information around diet. Most of us just muddle through, throw up our hands, do the best we can, and eventually revert back to whatever we learned a long time ago. And once again, I've come to the conclusion that we make healthy eating way too complicated. And in fact, I would argue that we really evolved to eat the same kinds of foods our ancestors have eaten for tens of thousands of years. Now, there's no such thing as a paleo diet. That's a made up kind of marketing thing. Our ancestral diet was highly variable depending on season of the year and where you live geographically. But there were certainly ancestral dietary patterns. And despite what many people perceive, our ancestors were not hunter-gatherers. We were gather-hunters and temperate. I'm not talking about the Inuits in the subarctic. In more temperate climates, it was much easier to gather food off the ground than it was to hunt out big animals. But what did we gather? It was primarily unrefined plants. It was roots and stems and leaves and seeds and fruits and nuts and vegetables and berries, legumes. That being said, there was no white flower tree. There wasn't a canola oil bush. There wasn't a Dr. Pepper nut. So all of this highly processed sugar and these highly processed grains and highly processed edible oils and artificial sweeteners and food dyes, on and on and on. All of those things are like putting diesel gas in your car. We're not designed to use dairy products other than our mother's milk. And there's several lines of evidence around that. So first of all, we had to domesticate other mammals to even get access to their milk. So when did that occur? Well, that was about 8,000 years ago. Now that may seem like a long time, but literally a blink of an eye if you look at the whole expanse of human history. And second of all, if you think about what dairy is, dairy is a biologic fluid that evolves species specific to facilitate baby mammals turning into mammals big enough to find food on their own. And once that happens, you don't need your mother's milk anymore. And that's why you don't go to the grocery store today and see human milk and cheese to bring home and put on your cereal or enjoy with a glass of wine. You'd find that kind of bizarre, I think. So the idea that we should be consuming another mammal's milk that evolved to facilitate a 70-pound cow turn into a 1,700-pound cow just doesn't make a lot of sense, biologically. Now, there's no doubt that our ancestors ate some meat, but 3 or 4 very important points. A, it wasn't very much. We don't know for sure, but probably didn't exceed 20 to 25% of our total calories. So 75, 80% plants, 20, 25% animals. B, they were wild animals, not cows, pigs, chickens, and even fish, which have been stuffed full of corn, antibiotics, and hormones, which have really become processed food because of how they're raised. But most importantly, I think you could argue that our ancestors probably did have a survival advantage to having that concentrated animal fat and protein because they needed to get big and strong, get away from leopard before they died of some infectious disease when they were 30. So they never had to worry about if I eat too much meat, animal foods, am I going to get cancer or diabetes or have a heart attack because they were already dead? And we've unmasked all of these chronic conditions, all of which are associated with both the overconsumption of the processed foods I mentioned earlier, as well as these animal-based foods, as we've extended human life expectancy. And then you step back and you think about the implications of how we raise the animals today on the environment, how we treat the animals. I think you can make a very strong argument, as long as you're not starved for calories, that at a minimum, a plant-forward diet, and ideally, especially when you start factoring into the ethics and the environmental aspects, that a whole food plant-based diet is the optimum diet for human health, planetary health, et cetera. Now, I do want to make it clear, I'm not necessarily talking about a vegan diet because there's a lot of conflation these days between the two. Veganism comes from a place of compassion around not harming other creatures, so don't eat them, don't wear them, don't use product tests on them. And granted, I think we all have had at some point some cognitive dissonance around where our food really comes from, right? I mean, that boneless, skinless chicken breast doesn't come all wrapped up pretty in plastic and bloodless in the back in the meat counter at the grocery store. There's a pretty horrific backstory to it that many people may not be aware of. But the problem is, there's a lot of really unhealthy food that's vegan, right? So white flour's vegan, sugar's vegan, corn oil's vegan, Oreos are vegan. You can get vegan cupcakes, vegan ice cream, vegan donuts, etc. So that's not necessarily what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is vegan in the sense that limits animal foods, but also these highly processed foods. And good examples like Beyond Burgers. I mean, Beyond Burgers are certainly better for the cow and better for the environment. And if you compare it to a hamburger, a little bit better for you, but not a health food. I mean, highly processed, 30% of the calories are from fat, mainly coconut oil, which is saturated fat. So that's not necessarily what I'm talking about. And by the way, I didn't learn any of this in medical school. So if you would have asked me 10, 12 years ago if I ate healthy, I would have said, well, sure, low fat dairy, lean meat, fruits and vegetables, whole grains, and I try not to eat too much ice cream because everything in moderation. And found out, unfortunately, that you can't outrun a mediocre diet, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Most of which have to do with the way our brains make choices. Part of the disconnect for me was, Monday the nurses bring cookies in the office, and Tuesday I have a donut in the doctor's lounge, and Wednesday I go out and have a cheeseburger and a beer, and Thursday it's someone's birthday and I have a little cake and ice cream. Friday rolls around, I'm patting myself on the back about how healthy I ate because I only had cookies once, right? So I was pretty good at moderating the trees, but I was really bad at seeing the forest. And again, that's common because you have to remember that the way we think about food evolved in a world of food scarcity, trying to keep us from starving to death, not to navigate the world we live in today, which is a world of food plenty, where we're surrounded by all this ultra processed, ultra palatable, cheap, convenient food. And I tore my meniscus with my dog, playing with my dog, and I had to wait a few months to get surgery, and I started to gain weight, and then I didn't do the rehab after surgery because doctors are terrible patients, and to gain some more weight. And next thing I know, I actually developed atrial fibrillation, which is an irregular heart rhythm, and it turns out I had undiagnosed sleep apnea. And so, I'm starting to collect doctors now. I've got a cardiologist. I'm on antiarrhythmic pills for my heart. I've got a sleep doctor, and I'm on a CPAP machine at night. And I go see my internist, and I got borderline diabetes and borderline blood pressure and cholesterol's through the roof. So, I was in my early 50s at the time. And so I was a patient. And in fact, the kind of plethora of issues I had, these lifestyle related diseases, was exactly the same thing that not most of my patients had. And I knew where I was headed, but I didn't know how to not go there, right? And then one day, I was laying on the couch, flipping through Netflix, and I came across the documentary Forks Over Knives. And I thought, wow, food is medicine. How come no one ever told me that? So I was on the faculty at WashU in St. Louis, and I looked up some of the research, and I was really, really, truly blown away by the breadth and the depth of the literature, the research about the healthfulness of a plant-based diet. So made a commitment to transition to a plant-based diet and rehab my knee, which I hadn't done. Well, 4 or 5 months later, I had lost 50 pounds. My cholesterol dropped 100 points. My sleep apnea went away. The AFib went away. My allergies went away. My asthma went away. My A1C normalized. My blood pressure normalized. I could exercise again. And as you mentioned, fast forward, I'm 64 now. And when I turned 60, right before the pandemic, I wanted to do something epic and trained for and did, Ironman. Now, I am not suggesting you're doing an Ironman to be healthy. There's probably a lot of reasons not to do that. Was a pretty crazy endeavor. But what I am suggesting is that when we can find balance between our physical health, our emotional health, and our nutritional health, our bodies are capable of remarkable things. We are the ones that get in our own way of performing and being optimally well, right? And what's interesting about all that is that, there's not one diet you need to follow if you're an Ironman triathlete, and another one to follow if you want to reverse your diabetes, and another one to lower your blood pressure, and another one to help prevent breast cancer. It's all the same thing. There might be more calories when you're training for an Ironman, but fundamentally, it's the exact same lifestyle we need to lead to help prevent, treat, and reverse many of these chronic diseases. And so, that's what the Barnard Medical Center in Washington, D.C., we have a practice that focuses on lifestyle medicine, particularly plant-based nutrition. We've got clinicians now licensed in multiple states, and you'll get a link if someone wants to come visit one of our clinicians for an online consultation. We do that. We take up most insurance plans. But the other project, project that I'm excited about, even within the plant-based world, there's still a lot of confusion and misinformation and disinformation around things like soy and gluten and nightshade vegetables, and where do you get your protein, and on and on and on. So my colleague Karen Dugan, who runs the Center for Plant-Based Living here, I'm in St. Louis right now. I was working with Karen last week. It's the nation's first and only fully plant-based culinary education center, and she's got online classes and things like that. But we've started a new project called the Doc and Chef, and if you Google that, it's a YouTube channel where what we're really trying to do is marry the nutrition science to your plate of food. Because what was happening was, whether she was teaching a cooking class or I'm getting the questions from my patients, we kept getting the same questions over and over and over and over. And so we thought, wait a minute, why don't we do these short, 15-minute videos, 20-minute videos, 10 minutes of science, 10 minutes of cooking, and really help close these gaps between nutrition. And we've got Chuck Carroll, who you may know from the Exam Room podcast at PCRM, is our producer, actually. And we've got 16 shows in shot already, and 3 are up, and we've got many more to come. So I think I'll stop with that and answer any questions that anybody has.
I know we have some questions. There was one question that a member wanted me to ask, and that is because you talked about you had type 2 diabetes, and I read in Borderline, and I read in the magazine Health Science, that wonderful article on you, and you were talking about it in there. But what about type 1 diabetes? Say people that have an autoimmune disease, do they do well on a whole food plant-based diet? And what about type 1 LADA diabetes? Yeah,
type 1.5. So that's a great question. So there's actually there's really 4 types of diabetes. Gestational diabetes is a transient diabetes that some women get while they're pregnant. And women who have gestational diabetes are at increased risk for developing type 2 diabetes down the road. But the three major types of diabetes are type 1 diabetes, which, as you said, is an autoimmune disease. Typically happens very quickly. We develop antibodies against the cells in our pancreas that make insulin. And so we lose that ability very quickly. Those are the patients, typically youth, and occurs in childhood. You go into diabetic ketoacidosis and things like that. And you become insulin dependent literally almost overnight. Type 2 diabetes, though, is different. And it's a disease not of not making enough insulin. It's becoming resistant to the insulin you make. And we'll talk about why that is in just a minute. Increasingly, though, we're seeing a third type of diabetes there's a couple names for it. One's called LADA, which is latent onset diabetes, of the autoimmune diabetes in the adult. Some people call it type 1.5 diabetes. So 1.5 diabetes, a lot of occurs later in life. It starts out acting like type 2 because it's much more insidious in onset, and it takes much longer for the pancreatic cells to be damaged, but eventually it turns into insulin dependence. Interestingly enough, I have had some, this is a whole another hour discussion, which I don't think we have time to get into, but there is some evidence that a whole food plant-based diet may help prevent and even reverse some autoimmune diseases, mainly mediated by gut bacteria. I have had patients that we were able to arrest the progress of LADA if we catch it very early. But for your specific question, though, we know that for type 2 diabetics, a whole food plant-based diet is fundamentally important because what most doctors don't really, even today, don't fully understand what type 2 diabetes really is, right? So the analogy I like to use is that of the kitchen sink. So imagine you woke up this morning and your kitchen sink was clogged and left the water on, there's water on the floor. So how do you fix that? Do you fix it with mops or do you unclog the drain and turn off the water? Well, as a clinician, I was taught to treat type 2 diabetes with mops, right? There's sugar on the floor, we mop it up with metformin, and then we had Januvia, then we had insulin, we mop all the sugar up. But then we got to get our mops back out because we haven't fixed the problem. So what's clogging the drain in type 2 diabetes? It's actually fat, which gets deposited in the muscle cells primarily, but also in the liver. But that makes those cells resistant to insulin. And the water is the processed sugar, the processed grains, the oils, alcohol, things like that is driving the need for insulin. So that's why a whole food plant-based diet plus some exercise is so important. But what's interesting about most of the type 1 diabetics that I see today, and even a lot of folks, have what I've come to call, many people come to call double diabetes, because they are insulin resistant on top of their underlying diabetes. Because if you think about it, it doesn't matter where the insulin comes from, whether you're injecting the insulin or if your pancreas has to make it. When we're resistant to insulin, we need more. And insulin is a drug and it has side effects, right? So insulin's a growth factor. So the more insulin we take, the more weight we gain. It also, more insulin we take, it predisposes to low blood sugars, which is not, our brains don't like that very much. And so I've had many patients who were type 1 who went on a whole food plant-based diet who were able to drop their basal insulin from 40, 50, 60 units a day down to 15 units a day. They've been able to reduce their short-acting insulin. So one way you calculate short-acting insulin needs is figure out, if your sugar goes up 100 points after you eat a certain meal, and 1 unit of insulin brings it down 10 points, that's a 1 to 10 ratio. So to bring it down that 100, you need 10 units of insulin. They go on a plant-based diet, they restore insulin sensitivity, that now it's 75 to 1. So to bring down the same 100, you got to take, instead of taking 10 units, you're taking 1 1/4 units kind of thing, right? So plant-based diets play a fundamentally important role in helping maintain insulin sensitivity, which is incredibly important, but not only but also for athletic performance. Actually, it's really remarkable.
Before we move on from that question, can I just ask one clarifying point? That was what I heard you say is that when you get type 2, you want to go ahead and correct it because you don't want to damage that pancreas.
That's right.
And get type 1.5.
Well, so no. So type 1.5 is an autoimmune disease.
Okay.
Now, people that have very long-standing type 2, which is poorly controlled, the pancreas can wear out. So it's not because the pancreas has been damaged from the antibodies, like you see in type 1 or 1.5. It's damaged from having to work overtime for years and years and years and years. So there's a blood test called a C-peptide level, which is a measure of how much insulin your pancreas makes. It's pretty rare. I've seen maybe a few cases of kind of burned out type 2 where their pancreas couldn't work anymore. Almost always when you see a low C-peptide, it's because they have undiagnosed or misdiagnosed type 1.5.
Debbie's going to ask some questions now because we've got some coming up in the chat.
All right.
Yes. So Dr. Loomis, you said that when you were feeling all of these things, you watched the Forks Over Knives movie or video.
That's right. It's a documentary.
Yes. So I want to know, what was your first response as a medical doctor looking at that? Was it an aha or was it a disbelief that you had?
Well, it made so much sense. And I thought, my first thought was, it cannot be this simple. It really can't be this simple. And literally, I came back to the office that day, signed on to the WashU library, did a quick literature search, and I was blown away with how much research there was out there about the health benefits. So it was an easy sell after that. I mean, it was, I was like, wow, maybe so when I embarked on that journey, my girlfriend at the time, we decided to do it for 3 months and ask ourselves 3 questions. How hard was it to do? How did we feel, or how did I feel during that 3-month process? And then what happened to me at the end with my biometrics? What happened to my weight and my cholesterol and all that? Well, it wasn't nearly as hard as I thought it'd be, other than a little gas the first couple of weeks, which is just, as you're setting your gut microbiome, I felt great. I increasingly felt better and better and better every single day. And then when I got to the end and saw, my cholesterol dropped 100 points and my prediabetes went away and all that, I mean, there was nothing then I was hooked, if you will.
So did you find it hard to sell it to your patients? I mean, this is a whole food plant-based, and, because I hear from so many people, well, I can't do that. Now,
Right.
You're a medical doctor. What is your response to that?
Well, so every single patient I see is a new patient. I spend an hour with them, and they all get that same talk that I just gave you all. They all hear that same thing. So what I'm trying to do, we can all have our own opinions about things, but we can't have our own facts. And the facts are that a whole food plant-based diet, plus regular physical activity, plus a good night's sleep and not stressing out, that's really the key to being healthful. So I just explain to them what it means to be healthy, and then try to give them the tools. And that's, again, one reason we started the Doc and Chef, because there's so much misinformation and disinformation that people sometimes need to be kind of walk down that path. We have an excellent dietitian, Karen Smith, who sees our patients. She's plant-based, so everyone gets referred to see Karen, especially if they're struggling. So and again, from a health standpoint, this doesn't have to be all or nothing. I mean, every healthier bite of food you eat is a healthier bite of food. Ultimately, I try to get people as close to all in as they can on a whole food plant-based diet, but that's not the message. I mean, the message I try to convey is we just need to put more plants on our plate, and we need to move more. We need to sleep more and such. That's how we're going to move the needle. It's not like you have to be vegan or plant-based to see me as a patient, nor do you need to be vegan or plant-based to get a lot of the benefit. Now, if you want all of the benefit, and especially when you start thinking about the planet we're going to leave for our kids and grandkids, I think you do probably need to get as close to all in as you can. But it's really a process that I help patients come through, and really try to understand, what are their barriers. I think the hardest part is that eating is a learned behavior, and all of the food we learned that a long time ago. Driving is another example of a behavior we learned a long time ago. And once we learn it, we stop thinking about it. You move to London tomorrow, you got to learn how to drive on the other side of the street. So what I'm trying to do is teach people to drive on a different side of the street nutritionally. And it's about relearning behaviors around food and helping them understand, by the way, once you learn how to drive on the other side of the street, you wouldn't drive on the wrong side of the street in moderation, would you? Because you don't have a moderate number of head-on collisions and run over a moderate number of pedestrians. That every time you eat that ice cream or that steak or that hamburger or cheeseburger, I mean, you are running over your pancreas and the lining of your heart and breast cells and colon cells. And so, can you get away with driving on the wrong side of the street every now and then? Yeah, but you got to be careful. And again, so that's how I come to it. Is really just trying to help people understand what it means to be healthy, helping them understand what their barriers are to being healthier, and providing them with the tools, whether it be YouTube videos or classes or, meeting with a dietitian. That's the way I approach it.
That was an excellent response. Thank you so much. Linda, it's yours.
Okay, we have another question actually it's a two-part question from the chat box. And Gary wants to know, what vitamins and maybe supplements do you recommend?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There are a few nutrients of concern on a plant-based diet, the big one being B12. A lot of misconceptions about B12. B12 doesn't come from meat. It actually comes from bacteria that actually come from the soil that get in and on the meat. And in fact, if you've seen the documentary The Game Changers, they talk about this. But most cows today and pigs and chickens are raised on in confined feeding lots, so they're not exposed to dirt anymore either, and they have to be supplemented with B12. We usually don't have to worry about it because we got our food out of the dirt. We drink water that had bacteria in it, so we were getting plenty of B12 naturally. But fast forward to the modern world, we put so many pesticides and herbicides on our food. We have to scrub the dirt off. We polluted the water, so we chlorinate to kill the bacteria. So we've lost, even if you're eating plants, we've lost that natural source of B12. So I usually recommend 500 micrograms a day of B12. In my personal opinion is it doesn't matter if it's cyanocobalamin or methylcobalamin. There's people argue one or the other. I've never seen anybody, frankly, I don't even know which one I take. I've never seen anybody too high or too low on either one of those formulations taking 500 micrograms a day. There are a couple of other nutrients of concern. In premenopausal women, iron can be a nutrient of concern. Dietary iron comes in two forms. It comes in what's called heme iron. That's iron bound to hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is the protein in our blood that carries oxygen, or it's what makes our blood red. So basically, when we eat, when we consume animals, we consume some of that dead animal's blood, which is really disgusting if you really think about it. So it's very easy for our bodies to absorb the heme iron. The problem is heme iron is highly, highly, highly inflammatory. Too much heme iron has been associated with increased risk for cancer and heart disease and things like that. Now, there is iron in plants, but it's not bound to hemoglobin. So it's called non-heme iron. And it is more difficult for our bodies to absorb the non-heme iron. But if you co-ingest a source of vitamin C throughout the day, along with these high iron foods, and those are things like green leafy vegetables and legumes, you'll absorb as much heme iron as you need, actually more than as much non-heme iron as you need. And it's not inflammatory. So the idea is, you make a soup or a stew or a salad, you put a little lemon juice or lime juice to brighten it up. You snack on citrus fruits, you bell peppers in a stir fry, that kind of stuff. Vitamin D is another nutrient not necessarily related to being on a plant-based diet, although milk has historically been fortified with vitamin D. We need vitamin D to absorb calcium from our diet. Vitamin D doesn't come from, there's no really good dietary sources of vitamin D other than fortified stuff that's been fortified. Vitamin D comes from the sun, and we don't get out in the sun as much, especially where I live in DC or here in St. Louis. And if we're out in the wintertime, you can't convert enough. So a couple of strategies around that. In Florida, it's probably not as much of a concern as long as you're getting 30 minutes of sunshine a day. What I do is personally, you have two choices. You can get your vitamin D measured periodically and dose accordingly if you need a supplement. What I do is because again, I'm not a very good patient. In the winter time, usually around October 1st through around May 1st, I take 2,000 IU of D3 over the counter, and then I don't take it. And then the rest of the late spring, summer, early fall, I'm outside biking and hiking and all that, so I don't worry about it. And then the last one that most people aren't aware of that I think we need to pay more attention to. And again, it's not necessarily having to do with a plant-based diet. It's iodine. We need iodine for healthy thyroid function. Again, historically, we didn't have to worry about it because there's plenty of iodine in the dirt. We got it in our food. We've been farming the same dirt for a really long time. So the soil has become depleted of iodine. The government recognized that in the 1920s and 30s and started to subsidize the salt companies to iodinize salt. So like Morton's table salt has iodine added. The problem is 3/4 of a teaspoon or so of Morton's table salt is your maximum amount of sodium you need for the day. It also gives you that 150 micrograms of iodine you need. If you like to cook and you're using finishing salts, table salt is not the one to use because the grains are too small. What I usually recommend is, so you have to be very careful. It's very easy to get way too much salt if you're using that. So if you can use iodinized salt, but you just need to be careful about the sodium. What I do is I take a kelp supplement. It's just a ground up seaweed. That's what I take. And you're looking for 150 micrograms a day.
The second part of that question, Dr. Loomis, was you mentioned milk, and is there something, do you use plant milk or what?
Yeah.
What
Yeah,
are your
yeah.
reasons for not using cow milk again? Or
Well, 'cause
dairy
I'm
milk?
not a baby, mainly because I'm not a baby cow. But but yeah, I don't, I mean, frankly, I just don't use a lot of milk anymore. If I'm gonna, mainly I use it if I'm cooking with something. I just use oat milk. Sometimes I'll put a little oat milk or whatever in my steel cut oats. So one way to think about dairy, because this comes up, the other question that comes up a lot is things like olive oil, right? Is olive oil healthy, right? That comes up all the time. Milk, cheese. So another way to kind of frame all this is we should think about our calories like we think about money. When we have extra money, we want to invest it in our financial future. What we're looking for is a positive return on investment, positive ROI. Well, that's how we should think about our calories, because every calorie you put in your mouth is either an investment in your financial future, or in your health future, or it's not, right? If you have 100 calories to invest in, a cup of milk or some olive oil or cheese or boneless, skinless chicken breast or beans and broccoli, what does the nutritional ROI of each of those look like? Well, 100 calories of oil, and it doesn't matter, pick an oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, olive oil, doesn't matter, is less than a tablespoon. So first of all, think about how much space that's going to take up in your stomach. Well, not very much, right? You're not going to be full. And what do you get back from that nutritionally besides fat? I mean, yeah, there's a few polyphenols, antioxidants in olive oil, but not very many. But how much fiber? Zero. How much protein? Zero. How much potassium to lower your blood pressure? Zero. So in fact, edible oils are your worst return on investments, 4,000 calories a pound, right? So what about a cup of milk or some cheese? Again, what do you get back from that besides, in the case of milk or cheese, you're getting fat, protein, and a little bit of calcium. What else? Nothing. There's no fiber. There's no cancer-fighting phytonutrients. You're exposing yourself to antibiotic residues and pus, and there's it's just nasty stuff. The hormones in the milk, again, you're talking maybe an ounce of milk, half a cup of milk. It's not going to make up. There's no fiber. You're not going to feel full, because if you really think about it. And the same goes with a chicken breast or a piece of salmon. There's about an ounce a piece, and get protein and fat. There's nothing else in there. Because if you really think about it, whether it be an egg or a cup of milk or cheese or a chicken breast or salmon or steak, those animals have just served as the middleman for the nutrition, right? So they've already used all the really good stuff. They've already used all the fiber and the phytonutrients and antioxidants and all that to run their own machinery. They concentrate what's left in the protein and fat typically, and which we consume. And again, like I mentioned earlier, 10,000 years ago, we probably had a survival advantage to having those animals do that for us, because we were trying to get big and strong and away from leopard before we died when we were 30. And because we're no longer starved for calories, we have the luxury of skipping the middleman and going straight to the plants, because where'd the calcium in the milk come from? Well, it came from the plants, the grass, the cow ate, right? So we have the luxury of skipping the middleman. Then you fast forward to, 100 calories of broccoli, or beans. I mean, that's 12, 14 ounces. What else do you get? Fiber, you're getting cancer fighting phytonutrients. There's there's lots of calcium in broccoli. People don't realize a half a stalk of broccoli has more protein than an egg. It's 8 grams of protein in a half stalk of broccoli, 6 in an egg. So, plants have protein. So again, that's the beauty of a whole food plant-based diet. It's really thinking about the package that these nutrients come in and maximizing your nutrition. The way you're going to maximize the nutritional return on investment is paying close attention to the package that it comes in.
Perfect answer. So the next question is kind of a two-part. We want to know what you eat on a daily basis, and then when you have a hard workout, what do you eat to fill that starvation mode or starvation that you have due to the calorie deficit?
That's right. So great question. So, so it's interesting. So when I'm not training, I actually do intermittent fasting, and I've come to the 5-2 strategy where I usually Mondays and Fridays when I'm in the office, I do a 24-hour water fast. And what's interesting about that is there's some evidence around, maintaining healthy weight and immune system and all that. But what's interesting about that is, and I'll get to what I eat in a minute because this is relevant. I think the thing that's done for me is it's reconnected my brain to my stomach. So, historically we ate when we were hungry, we stopped eating when we were full, but we don't do that anymore, right? We use social cues, we use time-based cues. It's lunchtime, it's dinner time. You go out to dinner with friends, everyone orders dessert, and then you order dessert, even though you're full, because socially that's what everyone's doing. You open a bag of pop, you make some popcorn, and the trigger to start and stop eating the popcorn has nothing to do with being hungry or full. It's the movie starts, the movie's over, the popcorn bag is empty. So when I started doing these 24-hour water fasts, 3:00 in the afternoon, I start to get a little hungry. Well, A, as long as I'm hydrated, I know I'm not going to pass out. And B, when I refeed that evening, I feel full. I know what it feels like to be full. And then I stop eating, right? So what's happened is there's some days, if I'm not really active, I might only eat one meal a day. And there's some days when I'm training for an Ironman, I might be eating 6 times a day, right? So I just let my body tell me when to eat and when to not eat. So, depending on what time and when it is and what I got in the refrigerator, I do a ton. I love to cook, and on the weekends I'll do some more fancy stuff, but I do a ton of just like very hearty, I don't want to call them salads, but like a greens bowl, right? Greens and quinoa and beans and chopped up veggies, and make like a tahini turmeric dressing. I do a lot of whole grain rice, brown rice, and beans, but again, chopped up stuff. I eat a whole bunch of different stuff. In the morning sometimes, and especially in the winter, I enjoy like steel cut oats. I put them in the Instapot, so they cook a lot faster. I do a lot of batch cooking. I'll make a whole thing of steel cut oats on Sunday and just put them in the refrigerator and eat off of that. And then I'll add some blueberries and walnuts and flaxseed. And so I take something that, when you think about the average person in the US gets 15 grams of fiber a day, we probably need 40 grams of fiber a day. I'm getting 20, 25 just in that breakfast kind of thing. And then for recovery, so once like I said earlier, when I'm training, I'm hungry, much more hungry. So I snack a lot more. I do a lot of hummus. I do some nuts, lots and lots of fruit. I did develop a lot of research that came up with a recovery shake that has as its base was tart cherry juice, and I added some blueberries and frozen banana and some chia seed and cinnamon and turmeric and kale and ginger. And I can honestly tell you, at age 60 years old, right before the last couple of weeks of training were pretty insane. And I get up on Saturday and go ride my bike 100 miles, get off the bike, run 5 miles, get up the next morning, run 18 miles, and then go to the pool and swim 3 miles. And I never got sore, I never got stiff. And it's because of the anti-inflammatory nature of the food that I was eating.
Debbie, I'm going to interrupt a minute because I wanted to ask that question about an individual who has diabetes induced from medically. She has sarcoidosis and
Sarcoidosis, yeah.
And while you talk about this, would you also, I know you wrote as co-author the article on deprescribing for diabetes,
yeah,
which was a really good article, and the caution about when you are taking medication and you have
yes,
diabetes, and that transition about, you could get low blood sugar right away.
That's right. That's great. That's a great question. So sarcoidosis is an autoimmune disease. We think it's an autoimmune disease. We're not even really sure, but people develop what are called granulomas, and they can affect your pancreas. So it's the equivalent. You can think of it, it's kind of the equivalent of type 1.5 or type 1, where your pancreas can't make insulin anymore. And so it's a different mechanism, but your pancreas can make insulin. But once again, many people, even if their pancreas can't make enough insulin, they can develop the insulin resistance on top of that. And so it's not uncommon, especially in someone who's insulin dependent, when they transition to a plant-based diet, especially a very low-fat, high-fiber diet, which is the way you're going to reverse that insulin resistance, unclog that drain. People can get hypoglycemic very, very quickly. And so, for my patients, I would rather them run a little high in the short run than risk episodes of low blood sugar. So I'll cut back their insulin dose very quickly, their long-acting insulin very quickly, and have them cut back on their short-acting insulin until they can kind of re-equilibrate. It is very important. I'm also a big believer in continuous glucose monitors, CGM. So that's like Dexcom or Freestyle Libre. Most doctors use them a little bit different than we use them. Most doctors use them to figure out when you need more insulin. I use them the opposite. It really is an educational tool. So to help guide deprescription, because sometimes you can get low blood sugars in the middle of the night and not know it. But even more importantly, it's to really start to connect the dots between, because we have this idea moderation is the key. Well, what happens when you have that little cake and ice cream at the birthday party? What happens to your sugars? What happens on a night you're stressed out and you don't get a good night's sleep? What happens to your sugars? What happens if I go for a walk after dinner or a walk before dinner? Does that change my sugars, my insulin needs? So I use it to help patients educate themselves about what the effect of a healthy lifestyle or a less healthful lifestyle, what the effect that is on your blood sugars. That's how I use the continuous glucose monitor. But if you're on insulin in particular and you're not on a whole food plant-based diet, or you're on a less healthy, more higher fat plant-based diet, then I do recommend you work closely with your provider, because you're going to need to monitor your sugars much more closely in that short term to prevent the hypoglycemia.
Dr. Loomis, how much protein would you recommend for the normal adult? How much should we be getting?
Yeah, so normal person needs about 0.36 grams per pound. I'm sorry, 0.3. It's 0.8 grams per kilogram, 0.36 grams per pound. So for most, and that's ideal body weight. So for most people, that's between about 50, 60, and maybe 70, 75, somewhere in there. Now, athletes do need more. Endurance athletes might need 0.5, 0.6, somewhere in there. A strength NFL football player, a bodybuilder might need up to 1 gram per pound. But what's interesting is, so, when I'm training for Ironman, I definitely need more protein. I probably need twice as much protein to help me repair my muscle and build muscle when I'm training. But guess what? So if you do the math backwards, a whole food plant-based diet has about 15% plant-based protein. So if you're on, say, 1,800 calorie diet, which is what most people need, somewhere in there, and you're kind of average size, and then you're getting that put me right at that 0.36, 0.4, somewhere in there. But when I'm training for Ironman, I'm not eating 1,800 calories. I might be eating 4,000 calories a day, right? So what happened to my protein intake? Well, it doubled. So now I'm right at that. If you're using kilograms, 1.6 as opposed to 0.8. So that's it's in general, you don't need to worry about how much protein you're taking. You should worry about how many, as long as you're getting enough calories. That's in fact what the first Doc and Chef episode is about. And I see the question. It should be ideal body weight. Ideal body weight.
Great. And there was one other question from Monica along those lines. She was curious about how much iron should premenopausal women have.
Yeah, so I don't. If you're taking heme iron, the answer is enough. depends on how heavy your periods are, and on and on. It's not something to be concerned about as long as you pay attention to higher iron plant-based foods and the vitamin C. So there's a great website called veganhealth.org, and it's evidence-based nutrition information. And they have an excellent article about iron. And it goes through a lot of the science. It talks about the difference between heme and non-heme iron. It talks about kind of roughly how to be sure you're getting enough iron. So it's veganhealth.org, and it's really good. Yep, it's really good.
Okay, quick question here. You were talking about iodine, and can you get iodine from sea salt?
If it's iodinized, you have to see if they've added iodine to it. Some sea salt has been iodinized, some of it hasn't. But again, you just need to be careful because a little bit of salt goes a long way. So you want to be sure you're not getting too much sodium, right? If you're getting your iodine from salt, you need to be sure you're not getting enough sodium. For most people, 1,500 to 2,000 milligrams of sodium a day. If you've got high blood pressure issues, more toward the 1500. If you don't, you can probably get by with 2000.
Okay, and last question here. You've done so great here. What are your thoughts on a water fast over a long 13-hour airplane trip?
Well, I probably would not water fast on an airplane trip. The air on is very dry and it's very easy to get dehydrated. There's pretty good evidence that some of the jet lag symptoms that people experience besides if you're going for 13 hours, I suspect you're changing time zones at least a few times. That some of that may be related to dehydration. It also may increase your risk for things like blood clots if you're sitting in a chair all day and an airplane seat. Dehydration can increase your risk. So I probably would not play around with a fast on a long airline trip. That is one time it's important to stay hydrated.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen because we want to say thank you to you. And this is coming to your office. In fact,
oh, that's great.
This was made when you were going to speak to us 3 years ago.
Right.
When COVID came and everything shut down, and we were going to show Game Changers in our movie theater.
Right.
It was going to be great. But, this quote is the way you say things are so powerful. Tell us what you mean by this quote.
Well, so, if you think about the way we think about health today, so this is well, and this is dead. Okay. Used to be in your 40s, 50s. Now it's in your 20s and 30s. So what this curve looks like, we can get away with a lot of unhealthy lifestyles for a while, but eventually, and again, it used to be 40s, 50s, now 20s and 30s, this curve starts to go down slowly but surely, right? And we start to see that interact with the healthcare system as this curve starts as the curve starts to go down. And our goal oftentimes when we see the doctor is to keep the curve going down too fast or too steep and hope we get to 80, right? And but how do we do that, right? Your blood pressure's high. It's whack-a-mole, right? Blood pressure's high. Here's some pills. Now your cholesterol's high. Now your sugars are high. Now you need a heart stent. Now you need chemo, right? Now you got Alzheimer's. You get to go to the nursing home. That's what we call it. That's not healthcare. So in this system, we are adding years to your life, but we are taking away life from your years, right? Recognizing it doesn't have to be that way, right? There's no reason this curve can't look like this, right? We all got to die. You just don't want it to be your fault. And so how do you do that? Well, it's lifestyle. We already talked about, what's the key to keep adding years to your life and sustaining life in those years? It's the lifestyle that we lead. It's the food we eat, how much we stress, how much we move, what environmental toxins we expose ourselves to. And what's crazy about that is at age 52, I'm down here, right? And at age 64, I'm back up here. And I guarantee you, there are not enough drugs in the pharmacy to take you from here to here. The only way you're going to do that is pay attention to your lifestyle. When was the last time I was this healthy? Probably in my mid 30s. So when people ask me how old I am, I tell them I'm 30 with 34 years experience, because that's how I feel. And that's the only way you're going to get maintain that kind of vitality as we age is through the lifestyle that we lead. And diet drives the majority of that. I mean, we talk a lot about diet. We still need to pay attention to the other couple legs of the stool, our mental health, our emotional health, our social connections, movement. We need to pay attention to those things, but diet is what drives most of them.
Yeah. Well, we just so appreciate that you hung in there with us and came back and shared today. And
Sure.
It's tremendous. I can't wait to listen to the YouTube version that'll be out next week. So you take care and make lots of those Doc and the Chef.
Doc and Chef, yeah. So again,
you don't have a podcast, do you?
We do not. But the first three are out. And if you watch it and you've got some things you would like to learn more about, drop a message in the comments on the YouTube channel. We'll get to them. We've got, like I said, we've got 16 filmed already. We got about 35 weeks worth of content. I'll be back in St. Louis in a couple of weeks with Chuck, and we're going to film 6 more. I'm just really excited about that project. And by the way, the other thing we're excited about, Karen and I we're doing live Doc and Chef. So imagine learning about protein as opposed to this kind of dry meat talking head. We're doing live Doc and Chef programming now. We've spoken. We were at the St. Louis. We were at Fairfax Veg Fest in DC a couple weeks ago. We presented for a group of healthcare providers. We did Live Doc and Chef here in St. Louis last week. We did a 2-hour presentation on the real talk, Truth About Health conference that's going on right now. We're speaking at St. Louis Veg Fest and working on, fingers crossed, headlining a wellness cruise after the first of the year. So.
Oh my gosh, you are busy. Well, fantastic. Oh, that was so great. Well, we need to let you go now.
All right.
I just want you to know how much we appreciate it. And then we're going to tell our group what's next. So take
All
care.
right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, so we have one more slide I want to be sure you all see, because this is what's coming up now. We're going to interview Dr. Delaney, and I think it ended up being the end of June. So her video will be up as an interview, not a live Zoom, in, I guess it'll be the 1st of July. And we'd love for you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you do, then the cool thing is we'll make 1,000 subscribers. We're real close now. I don't really know what happens when you get to 1,000, but that's a big chunk of people that are following our YouTube. And if you subscribe, check notifications. We've got lots of things that are being planned over the summer for interviews. And then we'll start back with our regular interactive Zooms in October. And we've got some speakers looking ahead to the 23-24 year.